Hey everyone and welcome. I'm Doji, a productivity academic and aspiring neuropsychiatrist. In today's boring but immensely valuable lecture, we'll be going over the psychology of productivity or goal achievement, as well as procrastination and how to address it, and unbreakable consistency and how to master it. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. So first of all, why the psychology of productivity or goal achievement? Because you've tried all the tips, tricks, and hacks out there, and none of them worked. The Pomodoro, the 2-minute rule, the 5-minute rule, the Pareto principle, the Zeigarnik effect, time blocking, you name it. These are all superficial band-aids that provide a temporary motivation boost at best, thanks to their novelty. They try to make a change to your behavior in an extremely superficial manner, not understanding that behavior itself is part of a much deeper and more complicated process. You see, we humans work like machines in a way with wired patterns. At the beginning of these patterns is your cognition, which is the verbal and nonverbal knowledge you have of the world, your core beliefs, your identity, your value system, and all the lenses through which you interpret the world. Essentially, it's how you perceive the world around you. This then leads to emotion, and then emotion leads to behavior. So it's cognition, emotion, then behavior. To illustrate this model, picture what happens when you see a deadly spider. Your cognition perceives that entity as poisonous insect. You then develop the emotion of feeling scared, and therefore you do the action of running away. Again, cognition leading to emotion, leading to behavior. But if I reminded you that you're actually wearing a VR headset and that this is a spider simulator game, you will not perceive the spider as a threat anymore, and therefore you won't be scared, and consequently you won't need to run away. So I changed your cognition or perception of the spider, and therefore your emotions of being scared, which aren't there anymore, and consequently your behavior, which is you don't need to run away anymore. Now, to make deep, lasting change to your behavior, you have to start from within, from cognition. And only then will positive emotions and consistent action follow effortlessly. I hope that makes sense. So, trying to adjust behavior itself superficially is like painting a car with a broken engine with yellow paint instead of its blue one and expecting that to fix it. It doesn't work because you're not addressing the actual root cause. Maybe you're too lazy to check the engine, or you know it's broken, but you're too scared to face the fact that you'll need to spend a lot to fix it. Whatever it is, reality doesn't care, and the new color paint won't help. This is exactly why productivity tips and tricks are not the solution to your entirely broken processes. They try to address behavior superficially. Now, mastering the psychology of goal achievement, on the other hand, is completely different. And this is not about shifting identity or manifestation through affirmation or any of that commercial garbage. It's essentially knowledge through which you can tame your reality, just like there's knowledge out there on how to tame lions. It's pure science of how to navigate with your machine, which is your mind, through the obstacles and challenges of achieving your goals, as well as a deep understanding of how both function in relation to each other, starting with procrastination. Now, I've made a full masterclass deeply dissecting the psychology of procrastination and proposing an actionable protocol on how to beat it. The feedback I've gotten on it is insane, and if you'd like to watch it, it's currently free. You can comment masterclass and I will DM it to you, or just get it from the link in the description. Now, for this video, I'll just show for you some of the relevant key points. Let's start by fixing our cognition of the true nature of procrastination. As always, we start with cognition. Now, procrastination is not a process in itself. It's a result or manifestation of an underlying process. It's important to understand that we shouldn't be tackling procrastination itself, but those underlying processes. Otherwise, we're doing what cats do with laser beams. They chase the laser dot, unaware that in order to grasp that light, they have to first grasp the source, which is the laser pointer itself. Now, we don't want to fall into the same trap. Now, those underlying processes of procrastination, similar to that example, are as follows: avoidance and indulgence. Avoidance procrastination is a form of procrastination in which you avoid doing the task completely. You delayed for weeks, months, maybe even years without taking a single step towards it, which is the popular form of procrastination, right? Now, indulgence procrastination, the other type, is a form in which you can initiate, but you barely maintain the activity for a few minutes, maybe 30 minutes max, before you get bored or frustrated and get off the desk to go doom scroll or indulge in whatever other thing. That's why it's called indulgence procrastination. It prefer to indulge in other things that maintain that activity. So, to save time, I'm only going to address some key points about avoidance procrastination here, which is the first one, since indulgence procrastination is very well addressed in the masterclass, and also because it's the more popular. Now, avoidance procrastination is the result of one thing and one thing only: negative emotions. Humans are partially primitive creatures, and that's why we're led by emotion, no matter how rational we would pretend to be. But still, why do we have those emotions to start with? Why do I feel fear and anxiety or dread from a literal book on a disk or a project or a simple task I want to do? I mean, it's not a spider, is it? To understand these emotions better, we have to resort back to the psychological cognitive behavioral model again. Cognition comes first. Your emotion towards your tasks is only the result of how you perceive it, which is cognition. And your brain never perceives a task as just a task that'll do. It perceives it as a whole entity consisting of the task and all the negative meanings associated with that task, like the guilt of not having started it earlier, the frustration of having failed at a similar task previously, the fear of failing to produce a perfect result at the end, which is perfectionism, or fear from a different but associated entity that has to do with this task, like fear from a test that causes you to avoid studying, in which case the book is not scary in itself, but it's associated with a dreadful entity, which is the test. Another example is the uncertainty of, not knowing how to approach the task if it's complex or multidimensional, and many more. Essentially, you perceive that simple task as a massive monster that you have to face. Now, there's actually a methodology to rewire those emotions completely and stop having them to start with. But that's a very complicated process, so maybe for a whole other masterclass or series. For now, we can do what's simpler and overcome those emotions through a zero resistance pathway. That's the beauty of productivity engineering. The processes underlying goal achievement are in ecstasy once you master them, right? That's my philosophy, and that's what I teach all the time. Now, as we said, there's an alternative hidden pathway within your psyche that you can literally exploit almost like a cheat code to negate those negative emotions and break the loop of procrastination. You see, negative emotions only exist within a goal orientation. In fact, that's why God blessed us with an emotional system to start with, is to give us strong signals of how well we're progressing towards our goals. That's why winning feels good and losing feels bad. That's the whole point of having an emotional system, telling you how well you're doing relative to your goals. Now, if you dissociate from that goal orientation, the emotional system doesn't have a job anymore. So it deactivates automatically because, again, that's its whole job, right? To illustrate this, here's an example. Imagine you're chilling in your room and you suddenly see, again, a massive tarantula spider running out from under the bed. You're gonna shit yourself. You'll be so scared and activate emergency mode. Maybe grab the closest pair of slippers and call your entire family, your entire bloodline for help. Now, what if you were walking down the street and you spot the same tarantula spider walking around 10 or 20 feet away from you? Would you feel scared? Would you feel threatened or even irritated? Not at all. You see, in the first example, which is in your room, the spider was under your bed. It was interfering with an implicit goal that you have at all times, which is maintain a safe and calm personal territory free of danger, right? So that's a goal that you had. That's why you developed negative emotions of fear or anxiety or whatever when you saw the spider. The tarantula spider that was under the bed interfered heavily with that goal of having a safe territory or room. So you responded with heavy negative emotions. However, the exact same tarantula spider on the streets produced no negative emotions whatsoever because it's not interfering with any goal you have. It's far away minding its own business. It does not exist within a goal-oriented scheme like the first one. It doesn't have to do with your goals, implicit or explicit. You don't care about the spider being in the streets, right? Obviously, not this close, probably. Like, this is just for illustration. Like, if it was this close, you'd probably panic a bit. But imagine it was a bit farther, right? You don't really care about that. It doesn't interfere with any of your goals, biologically, personally, whatever. Now, we're going to do the exact same thing to the negative emotions that cause avoidance procrastination. We're gonna remove them from a goal-oriented scheme. And how exactly we're going to do that? Through the 3-3 protocol. I tell anyone struggling with procrastination to initiate the task for 3 minutes, once or twice a day, for 3 days with no particular goal in mind. Now, I know you might have heard that a lot of places elsewhere, but please hear me out. Don't underestimate those 3 minutes. You might have heard it everywhere else, but this is entirely different. I talk about this in deep detail in the masterclass, but let me just quickly overview the insane power of that seemingly simple protocol. First off, making the target itself to genuinely, and I'll tell you why it has to be genuine in a few minutes, making the target to genuinely just initiate for 3 minutes and that's it, removes the task from its goal-oriented scheme. Now, that's the first short-term benefit. You now don't want any specific results. You remove it from that goal orientation. There's no goal-oriented scheme and therefore no negative emotions. There are no failures that you fear. There's no guilt, no frustration, no uncertainty about what to do because you have no specific goal in mind, right? It essentially has nothing to do with the task itself. You'll just engage for 3 minutes. You're not looking for a certain outcome. You're not looking to you're not looking for anything in particular. You have completely dissociated from the state of goal orientation. Like if it's studying, study just a page or however much. If you're doing your thesis as a graduate student, write however much you can in 3 minutes. If you want to work out, do 1 or 2 sets, whatever it is. Now, I know you hear this everywhere else, but please just listen to the end. It's not the idea of a mini habit or just trick your brain by initiating for 2 minutes and then you'll go on. It's not like it has absolutely nothing to do with that. Again, the goal of this is to just dissociate from the goal orientation and therefore dissociate from negative emotion that would have otherwise entailed. Therefore, you are finally able to act, which is the behavior. See how we address behavior from deep within? We didn't just superficially paint it with something or apply a superficial technique of any kind. We address the issue from its core. The beauty of addressing productivity from its source is you can literally find alternate pathways to initiating, like in that example, by turning that massive monster, which you perceive the task as, into one that is virtually the size of an ant at best, which you can squish so easily. Now, that's the first thing, which is, as we said, making the target itself to just initiate for 3 minutes makes the task dissociated from a goal orientation. That's the first thing. So it removes those emotions which serve to let you know how well you're doing relative to your goals, which now don't exist because your goal is to just initiate. Now, the second thing is that there's probably a high chance that you'll continue if you're genuine about sufficing with 3 minutes, okay? If you're lying to yourself, which is what people call the 5-minute rule or the 2-minute rule or whatever it is, you'll most probably not even start. Because the problem with that rule is that if it's done with the intent of going beyond 5 minutes, from deep inside you, it won't work. You are yourself, brother. You can't trick yourself. You and your mind are like you're the same entity. You're the same person. You can't trick your mind. You have to be honest with yourself. That's why I tell you in this protocol, just initiate without having any particular goal in mind. And you have to genuinely suffice with just having done the thing for 3 minutes over those 3 days. I'll tell you what to do after that in a few minutes. But for now, you just have to understand that self-honesty is important in being productive in general, really, not just when it comes to beating procrastination with that specific protocol. Now, the third benefit of this protocol is that it breaks the cycle and initiates the rewiring process. Now, this is the only long-term benefit and is the greatest benefit of that protocol because when you initiate the task that your mind perceived as such a massive threat, your mind starts to be convinced that it was truly developing emotions out of proportions and that the task was never that scary, truly. The repetition of this cycle, that is why I tell you to do it for 3 days, in which you break the emotional barrier, is what causes the habit of procrastination to be rewired into a habit of initiation, which is the most substantial impact of the protocol because it's a long-term rewiring process. Now, let's take a step back and see how we address initial procrastination. This is usually the moment at which when I'm working with someone and I help with productivity advice with procrastination in specific, and I explain this phenomenon or concept to them, their mind goes absolutely insane. Like their mind is absolutely blown. You see, what I told you to do at the end of the day is just do the thing, just start. And that's literally what everyone else tells you, right? But what we did differently was on the level of cognition from deep within. We modulated what's known as value perception, in which you perceive, and again, perceive, which is cognition, you perceive those 3 minutes of initiation differently now. You understand their value because I illustrated their immense power. And you no longer regard them as a measly trick or hack from an AI slop video. That's why I told you, you have to listen till the end intently to the actual effects of that protocol. Now, you actually understand what such 3 minutes in such a protocol can do on a very deep level and how they can help. And this shift in the value perception, which is a change on the cognition level, is what then generates enough motivation to do the thing because obviously we're human, so we have to actively perceive something as worth doing or valuable to do it, which is exactly what we did. What everyone has been telling you, as much as initiating is concerned, is, just start for 2 minutes, just do the thing, just, check your bin, whatever it is, they're saying, go lift off that heavy rock. That's essentially what they're saying. And internally, you're like, what? Lift that heavy rock in front of me? Why? What for? Like, will that really make my life any better? What we just did is we turned that into, go lift that heavy rock. There's a gold treasure underneath. You'd then gladly lift the heaviest rock on earth without asking why. It's the same you and probably the same rock, but with a different cognition, because we've modulated your value perception, which is a form of cognition, as we said, and therefore we produce different behavior. Not only that, but you also now hopefully understand procrastination on a deep level, which again makes your perception sharper and more capable and makes you more capable of dealing with it. Now, to sum all of this up, the only actionable advice I gave you is essentially the 3-minute protocol where you just initiate for 3 minutes for 3 consecutive days, which is probably what everyone tells you, right? But the real work we did was deeper on the level of cognition. And that's the beauty of the process. You'll love to see it. You'll love to hear it. You'll love to do it. It is so enchanting to be able to tweak and modulate the dynamics of your own mind with such brilliance and control to get what you want out of life. Beautiful process indeed. You'll love to see it. Now let's talk about consistency for a bit, and specifically how to build unbreakable consistency from the same perspective of neuropsychology. We can't discuss anything without agreeing on its definition first. That's why before anything, we need to lock in and agree on the definition of consistency. And this is the definition of consistency as far as we're concerned from dictionary.com. Okay. It is steadfast adherence to the same principles, course, form, etc. That's it. Adherence to the same principles, course, whatever. What people do, however, is that at the end of that definition, they subconsciously add the phrases in an uninterrupted manner, with a perfect streak, with perfect output, without missing a day, whatever. They just add these phrases when it didn't say any of that, but people still actively choose to view consistency as this iron rigid flow that doesn't break and is perfect all the time, when it's literally the exact opposite. Because come to think about it, why do most people regard consistency as doing the same thing with maximal efficiency every day? Why not every hour? And I'm serious about that. Why every day but not every hour? Why not every week, month? Why is it usually every day? It's just a random timing that we attribute to consistency for no particular reason. It sounds nice, but this is very harmful, and here's why. Having this binary perception of consistency in which you either do the thing daily with perfect efficiency and output, or else you miss it and drop the whole thing, is brutally harmful to your reward circuitry, because those high standards you're setting up are causing you to perceive any flaw as a failure, which is very demotivating, even on a neurochemistry level, causing you to drop the thing completely. We've all been there. The cycle of promises followed by breakdowns in which you make big goals, stay consistent for a few days, start dropping one thing, and eventually you drop the other thing and then the other, and you find yourself falling back into the exact same lifestyle, right? I call that the doom loop. And the problem is that you probably naively respond to that perceived failure by setting higher standards the next time to make up for that failure, which only makes matters worse. You can probably recall 1,000 times in which you fell into that pattern. Again, I call it the doom loop, and I've been there probably close to 100 times, really. The way to get out of this hell is as follows. First of all, you have to redefine consistency to what it actually is. It's not perfection. It's not a perfect streak. Again, steadfast adherence to the same course. Okay? So it is quite simply showing up. In fact, we could say that what most people define as consistency is only one form, which is the rigid daily consistency. But that's only micro consistency. There's also macro consistency, right? Which is consistency on a larger scale. So in this graph, we can illustrate micro consistency on a daily level as this illustration here. This represents a week, 7 days, and you only drop 2 days, so you could say you're consistent. But if you do the thing on most weeks or some weeks, you can still call yourself consistent, right? So if you do it for 5 days on week 1, 5 on week 2, 2 days on week 3, 5 days on week 4, like you don't have to be poetically consistent. I hope that makes sense, but there's no rigid form of consistency really. It's a very liquid term, and you have to perceive it in that liquid manner. It doesn't have one rigid form. Right now, you can go even beyond that and say that there's another form of macro consistency over the span of months in which you do the thing, for some weeks on 1 month, then drop it for another month, then pick it back up, then drop it, then pick it back up for 2 months, and so on. These are 6 months, 12 months of the year. So over the span of the year, you can say that on a macro scale of monthly consistency, you were consistent. You didn't break your consistency, right? On an even bigger scale of yearly macro consistency, you can still say the same. If you maintain a habit for 2 years, then drop it for 2 years, then pick it back up for a year, drop it for 4 more years, pick it back up for 3 years, you can still say that is consistent. That hasn't been necessarily broken as consistency. You just need to stop obsessing over a certain form or pattern for consistency in the form of a streak, an uninterrupted habit tracker, days that you mark across your board or on an app or whatever. No, it doesn't have to be like that. So, as we said, if you do something daily, weekly, monthly, or even yearly, you're still consistent, just on an unusual time scale, but still consistent nevertheless. If you work out only once or twice a week, you're still consistent. If you drop a whole week or two because you got sick and get back on track, you're also still consistent on a macro scale, on a bigger scale. It is so important to plant this deep down your cognition that dropping a day, a week, or a month doesn't necessarily mean you broke consistency. You can still bounce back to the act and maintain macro consistency, which is what truly matters at the end of the day, because this micro consistency, it actually gets you nowhere. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. And if you hear anyone talk about how they achieved the most ambitious of their goals, it's just about the macro consistency of showing up consistently over a stretched span of time. So I don't want you, again, to perceive consistency in that rigid form. Dropping the habit for a day, a week, or a month doesn't mean you broke consistency unless you make it so. This binary perception of consistency as the perfect streak, the perfect plan, the perfect efficiency, whatever it is pure self-sabotaging. The more versatile definition of consistency, however, enables you to see how easy it is to develop unbreakable consistency. It's by simply reframing how you see consistency and choosing to see the full picture. You'll miss days whether you like it or not. You'll underperform on many days whether you like it or not. You won't be able to show up on some days whether you like it or not. It's about time you accept that this narrow perspective daily micro consistency is a virtual goal that you set to make up for past failures and is simply non-achievable. Although it's hard for your ego to swallow, adopting the macro consistency mindset is your only way towards self-compassion, realism, and consistent progress. To sum all of this up, if you just show up most of the time, you're consistent. I repeat, just showing up. Even if you do the thing for a few minutes, studying for 10 minutes today, 1 hour tomorrow, 5 minutes afterwards, then not studying for a whole week, and then coming back on track to study for hours a day, then maybe 30 minutes the day after, dropping a day, coming back with hours. That right there is the most natural form of consistency. How am I going to make any progress by just showing up though? Like, how are those few minutes gonna get me to reach my goals? Well, here's the other trap. People think that the goal of consistency is to produce output or to actually make heavy progress towards their goals. That is wrong. And I'll go deep into that when I dissect the habit stages in a future video or when I talk more deeply about consistency itself. But put simply, in my own model of habit development, the stage of consistency in which you simply show up and the stage of output in which you actually put in enough work in the form of hours mostly, those are two different stages. I'll discuss the exact process of how to go from minutes to hours and go from just showing up to doing a ton in the future. But for now, what you need to know is that I have them split up for a reason. James Clear, which is the godfather of habit building and such, the author of Atomic Habits, he once mentioned a friend of his who spent a whole year just going to the gym without exercising. He literally put on his gym clothes, went to the gym, and then went back home after doing, I think, like one set or spending 5 minutes at the gym, something like that, for a whole year. He was establishing a habit first before amplifying it, and that's how it should be always. You must learn to show up first without waiting for results or outcomes before you learn to increase your output. And if your ego can swallow this and wants a rocky themed comeback and thinks life is a TikTok hit in which you're going to make a transformation in 30 seconds or that you can flip your whole life around in 2 days, I'm sorry, but I can't help you. So those two cognitive reframes or shifts in perception in which you first off perceive consistency as a macro scale consistency, first off, and secondly, perceive consistency as a stage that you have to maintain before proceeding to the output stage are the two cognitive shifts on the level of, again, cognition, which are going to lead you to have a different expectation and therefore different reward sensation from maintaining that consistency on its own. Because if you maintained it with the bare minimum, thinking that this is what progress should be, you'd be wrong, you'd be disappointed, and you'd just fall into the same cycle of making hyper ambitious plans, failing at them, going back to your old lifestyle, getting motivated to start the loop again. You know, that whole messy, chaotic cycle. So you have to be patient with developing baseline consistency before proceeding to output. With those more realistic expectations, you'll actually be able to develop consistency because it's much easier to just show up for now, establish that, and then proceed to amplify your output. I hope that makes sense. Now, the benefits of that minimum baseline consistency, I've gone over them in my previous video about consistency, and I'll probably dive deeper into them in future videos, but you don't want to underestimate those few minutes of showing up. And if you're asking the question of, okay, how long should I do this before I start optimizing and increasing my output? Well, my answer is most of the time, according to my personal experience with students and professionals, it's about 60 days. You'll have established the habit and the identity and then find it easy to amplify the output if actually sometimes you'll find the output amplifying on its own just because you stuck to it. Now, again, did you notice what we did with consistency? It's the exact same thing we did with procrastination. We just adjusted our perception of the core meaning of consistency as well as to reinforce the value of just showing up, which is work on value perception to encourage and motivate that behavior. The only actionable piece of advice I really gave is, yet again, just do the work. But it hits entirely different because we address the root psychology. Again, magic. You'll love to see it. You love the process. It is absolutely romantic. Now, finally, what I want to say is the algorithm is messing me up so badly. So a like would be really appreciated at this point. I hope this guide helped you, and I'll see you in my next lecture. Peace out.